You couldn't be more transparent that you don't give a you don't give a you don't give a.
Why are people that do politics online so f***ing weird? This is him conceding bad faith right now.
Now, what would I have said if Joe Biden did something like that? Nothing. In fact,
So at this point, it is now revealed Rob has no idea why people are upset.
I don't give a shit what the rules are. I'm saying
know what the rules are?
No, I don't give a shit right now. What I give a shit right now is, do you think?
Why?
Because listen,
He's straight up John Goodman.
That's the point you're missing.
bullshit.
Rob, why? Why are you like this, Rob? Let's review the conversation I had with Rob Noerr. Boy, was it something. So he was talking about the situation at the Arlington cemetery, and he got very aggressive with me. You can tell that he models his like debate style after Andrew Wilson for sure. It's just funny to me, like people call Rob reasonable, and that is just not my read on him at all.
So first question I have for you is, can you point to me any of your tweets or any of your videos that you've done talking about the claims from these family members?
So his premise here was that because I haven't tweeted specifically about the Gold Star families who spoke up in support of Trump, that I can't possibly care about fallen soldiers in Arlington, and that I'm just using it for political purposes. I don't really actually care about the rules. I'm just looking for a way to insult Trump, which I found to be a bit obscene. I've told you guys, he was like one of my best friends. He was like my friend that I lost in Iraq in a roadside bomb was literally the guy who got me interested in politics. He was super smart. Like his dad was a history professor, and he my buddy Tim had a deep knowledge of not only U.S. history but world history. It was like drunken conversations with him at 3 a.m. talking about, like, I would just ask him questions and he would rant about Rome for like an hour and a half. And then he would rant about like World War II. I mean, he was just so smart. That was him. Yeah, that's my buddy Tim right there. He was 22 years old. I mean, it was, yeah. Yeah, I got the call from my friend and he was like, are you sitting down? And then he told me, and it was brutal. It was brutal. He got killed in a improvised explosive device in Iraq. And so this guy, Rob, this piece of shit, decides to start the conversation by implying that I don't care about like this kind of thing, which I just found to be so obscene.
I didn't talk about that.
You didn't talk about it?
No.
Okay, but you were heavily interested in talking about how Trump disrespected the soldiers, correct?
Yeah.
So would you say that a reasonable interpretation from the people listening to you then could be that you're full of shit and you don't actually care about disrespect?
Like, this is how he starts the conversation. It's just so crazy. Why are people that do politics online so f***ing weird? Why do they do this? Why do they start like so nasty and combative and blah, 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 you know?
Members of fallen soldiers, because you didn't even bother to talk about what these particular families themselves have talked about?
Sure. I mean, if you want to go with that, that's fine. But
so you acknowledge it. You acknowledge it.
I mean, if that's what you think.
At this point, I was just like, I just don't even want to go down that road. Fine, I'll concede it. Let's go to the point. Like, that was my logic here.
Then that's fine.
No. It's not what I think. It's what I'm asking. No,
you asked me. Okay, go ahead.
I'm asking for your. You can't just say sure and then say if that's what you think. If that's not what I think, then please give me a defense. Give me a reason.
So I'm trying to understand your logic here.
Yes.
So you're saying that if I have not tweeted about these
on this website, Jesus Christ, why can't any of you people be normal? Why is it like this all the time here on Twitch?
Particular families, then I couldn't possibly care about like rules at Arlington. That's what you're saying, right?
I'm saying that your concern of the rules in Arlington are, you correct me if I'm wrong, that it is
this is insane, you know? Like, Rob, if I look up on your Twitter account, like, have you ever tweeted about people starving in Africa? Oh no, you must not care about it. Like, the idea that the only way that you could possibly care about things is if you've tweeted about it before is fucking stupid. This is insane.
Disrespectful to dead soldiers and their families, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. If you really cared about the thoughts and feelings of dead soldiers and their families, and these aren't random families that we're talking about. We're literally talking about the families and their statements of the event that you're criticizing and what they have said. If you really cared about disparaging family members of fallen soldiers, surely you would have breathed anything on this, and yet you haven't. Why?
Rob, so there were 4 soldiers that were ambushed and killed in Niger in 2017. There was one Gold Star family who spoke to their experience when Trump called them. He said that they said that he told her, well, your husband knew the risks before he got involved, and that he didn't even mention the soldier's name.
True story, by the way.
What he said was...
The president.
Yes, the president said that he knew what he signed up for, but it hurts anyways. And it made me cry because I was very angry at the tone of his...
Donald Trump called the wife of a fallen soldier, and one of the first things he said to her was, well, he knew the risks when he signed up. He didn't even know the soldier's name.
Voice and how he said it, like he couldn't remember my husband's name. And that what hurt me the most, because if my husband is out here fighting for our country and he risks his life for our country, why can't you remember his name?
Her mom spoke up about it as well. I'm sorry, the soldier's mom spoke up about it as well and corroborated the story. The soldier's mother, Kawanda Jones Johnson, had backed up the Congresswoman's account. Jones Johnson said she was also in the car listening to the call and told Washington Post, quote, President Trump did disrespect my son and my daughter and also me and my husband.
Do you say anything about that when it happened?
No, I don't remember also going to X and complaining when I saw footage of Arlington when Barack Obama or Joe Biden were there. Biden himself...
He just pivots away from like his logic is I can't possibly care about anything related to Arlington because I didn't specifically tweet about this family. It's like, okay, well, did you tweet about this family in 2017? And then he pivots away. The very definition of bad faith. He will not engage substantively in what you're saying.
Using footage of him in Arlington for a campaign. I didn't stand and say, oh my God, how disrespectful, blah, blah, blah.
So I looked it up. I didn't know this at the time that I had the conversation. The rules in Arlington are that you cannot film anything for political purposes. Obama and Biden both went to Arlington for various ceremonies in the capacity of the vice presidency and the presidency. And then Biden did use footage of him in Arlington from 2010 or 2015 maybe in a campaign video in 2020. But it was video that was taken by DOD staff, so it was sanctioned by them. And in the campaign ad that Biden did, it had a disclaimer that this is not an endorsement from the Department of Defense or any fallen soldier or whatever. They added this like specific disclaimer. Rob is trying to equivocate what Trump did, which was like shove staff out of the way and then take selfies in front of fallen soldiers' graves. He literally broke federal law doing that. He's trying to draw an equivocation with this campaign ad that Biden released in 2020, and they're just not the same thing at all.
Affirmative claim, as is Kamala Harris's family, let me finish, as in this media and Kamala Harris's campaign, that are saying Trump's disrespectful of soldiers because of this event, and this event that he was invited to, the very fallen soldiers, they haven't given two yourself included as to what their feelings were. Not at all. So the idea that if you would just admit, yeah, you're right, I actually don't give a shit what these people say. I don't give a shit about falling soldiers. I only give a shit about using this as an attack against Donald Trump. Then we could move on to your line of questioning.
Rob, one of my best friends from high school, his name was Tim Shea. He was killed in Iraq in 2004, I believe. I do care about dead soldiers. It's a terrible thing when it happens.
Then why haven't you covered what these families have talked about?
What a stupid... His logic is that I can't possibly empathize with anybody who's lost somebody in war if I haven't tweeted about every single person who has lost someone in war. That's what he's saying right now. That's his logic.
Let's skip with this. Let's get to the particulars of why what Trump did was wrong. Can we do that?
No, we can't, because your ultimate conclusion of why what he did. I'll tell you why we can't. Because I'll tell you why we can't. Because you've already conceded.
I will concede.
No.
Concede whatever you want me to concede. Can we move on to the next thing?
No. Because this concede, because
I don't care.
You're not conceding. You're not conceding. Okay, I just want you. You concede in this framework, and then we can move on. You say right now, I, Hutch, literally do not give a shit about fallen soldiers or about these families. I don't give a shit. I only care about this for partisan
helps the
politics.
conversation
No, not if it helps. Not if it helps.
Dude, he is so belligerent. Do you understand how hard it is to have conversations with these people?
You could say, I'm going to let you say your piece here for a couple minutes now, and then I'm going to tell you why we can't just move on. So you go ahead and filibuster and say your piece of what you want, and then I can tell you why that's bullshit. Go for it.
It's all projection. He's been filibustering here.
Are we at the point where I can talk about like why what Trump did was bad?
You can talk about what you want for 1 minute, and then I'm going to talk about why we can't move on and what you're saying is bullshit.
Are you not going to address the substance of anything I say?
Are you going to let me explain why I'm not going to?
This is him conceding bad faith right now. If you tell me just up front, I'm not going to engage in the substance of what you're saying, that's like the textbook definition of bad faith. This is him just telling you, like, no matter what you say, I'm not going to engage with what you say because I'm going to assign you some premise based on nothing whatsoever. And then we're just never going to move past that premise. It's insane.
What are we doing here, Rob?
You called into my show because I was making the point that you don't give a shit about these families of fallen soldiers. Instead, you're politically grandstanding. And then you come on and sarcastically say, yeah, I'll concede whatever you want. You're right. I didn't talk about them. I'll concede for this.
Because I'm not interested in getting bogged down in this. This is not interesting. Like having this conversation for 10 minutes is just not interesting. The point of the conversation was to talk about like what happened at Arlington.
For the sake of argument, now let's talk about what I want to talk about.
You're assigning something that doesn't apply to me. I don't tweet about a lot of things. I don't tweet about a lot of things, Rob. That doesn't mean that I don't care about anything that I don't tweet about. I've never tweeted about, I think, like starvation in Africa. Do you think that I don't care?
I'm just giving you guys reruns here.
That people starve in the world?
It is not. What you're doing is what you're making.
This is an incredibly flawed way.
It is not incredibly.
Whether or not somebody cares about something.
It is not incredibly flawed because these families are the particular families in the particular incident that we're talking about that you're saying proves that Trump disparaged.
The family members who invited him there are not the reason why people are complaining about what Trump did.
Just the families of fallen soldiers. And when these people specifically say, actually, it's Kamala Harris, we wanted Trump there, and it's Kamala Harris that disparaged them, you haven't given a shit to even breathe one sentence on what these people have said. And I'll finish by saying this. When you said the reason that having this conversation about the rules matters is because ultimately these rules being broken by Trump proves that...
This conversation gets really wild in a little bit here. Just bear with me because it gets kind of crazy.
He doesn't care about the families of fallen soldiers, and you won't even talk about the families in this.
Some of the chat is just so funny. Man, just the way Hutch talks, there's no conviction. He knows he doesn't believe what he's saying. All a game to him. Worst kind of person. Coward.
This particular incident, not in some random incident that occurred in 2000.
He does sound like Paul Giamatti. He does. He sounds like Paul Giamatti if Paul Giamatti was like shrunken down to 3'5". Like if you left Paul Giamatti out in the sun for like 3 days.
17 or some random incident that occurred elsewhere, but the specific incident that you're saying that proves that Trump doesn't care about fallen soldiers' family.
Oh, I missed that. Someone in chat said he only cares about his imaginary friend. Okay.
And you won't even breathe a word. And then worse, you just sort of sarcastically go, yeah, I'll concede whatever you want me to, just so we can move to what I want to talk to. You couldn't be more transparent that you don't give a shit. You don't give a shit. You don't give a shit. That's the point. You only care about using this as a weapon to attack Donald Trump, just like Kamala Harris, just like the mainstream media. You don't give a shit about these families. You don't care. You just want to weaponize going after Trump for breaking some sort of rules violation that you weren't even aware of 3 weeks ago.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Let's say there's a cemetery for fallen soldiers.
Okay.
And let's say there's a fallen soldier, and this person was diehard MAGA. Diehard, right? Okay. Loved Trump and was killed in Afghanistan or whatever. Would you be okay with Joe Biden taking a selfie with that person's headstone visible in the selfie for a campaign photo? Would you be okay with that?
Whether or not I would be okay is irrelevant to this specific
What do you mean it's irrelevant? What do you mean it's irrelevant? What do you mean? He doesn't want to answer that question because the answer to that question totally undermines his entire argument. His entire defense of Trump crumbles if he answers that question honestly.
situation,
What do
though I
you
will
mean?
answer it, though I will answer it because it wouldn't prove me being okay with it, wouldn't prove whether or not the other side or the families had grievances about why Joe Biden himself or why Donald Trump himself was a piece of shit and directly did things that were far more offensive to the family. Now, what would I have said if Joe Biden did something like that? Nothing. In fact,
It sucks that like some people just cannot be honest when you press, like there are some questions when it comes to Trump, like I feel like it's pretty easy to like make the case that Trump makes bad decisions and get into like the minutia of each individual decision. And like, I think it's really easy to sort of guide people there if they're honest in their answers. If Biden did that, he would flip his, to be clear, he would flip his
long since taken the stance that both sides oftentimes take terrible tragedies and then put those people up as sort of gold star families, or gold star I understand is just talking about military, but I've said many times, like, listen, I understand the political importance of that and I understand how powerful that message could be, but I also understand that a lot of it's emotional and I don't usually weigh in on a lot of those things. What makes this case uniquely different is this. So I wouldn't have, if Biden had done that before, I'd have probably been more time talking about how he had dementia and it's being covered up by people like you in the mainstream media, how he was.
He just deflects to just nonsense. He's just like, you can just see like he's just trying to distance himself from that question as much as possible. And so he just gives this non-answer like, no, I wouldn't talk about it. And I'd rather be talking about the dementia. It's just silly.
Answer for the economy, how he was. I'm not pivoting. I'm telling you, you're acting
Not
like
pivoting by talking about Joe Biden's dementia.
Oh, if Biden did something, if he posed in front of things at Arlington and used it for his campaign, you would have flipped out. I wouldn't have. In fact, isn't it true that Biden used photos of him at Arlington in a campaign ad in Memorial Day of 2020? Can you go back?
Those photos were taken by DOD staff, and those photos were taken when Biden was vice president. Those photos were not taken for campaign purposes. That doesn't mean you can't use those photos in campaign ads later on, but Biden added a disclaimer in that ad saying that this is not an endorsement from like the Department of Defense or whatever.
I can find any video of mine or any tweet of mine criticizing that? Can you do that?
Because Biden didn't break any rules when he did that.
You can't? You can't?
Agree. Wait, let me speak, for Christ's sakes. Everybody, like, listen, so many people in the left-wing space say that you're reasonable.
That's because they're smart.
Can we have a reasonable discussion without you, like, you keep interrupting me and pivoting to things that don't matter?
How does that not matter?
Right. So the rule at Arlington Cemetery, especially in Section 60, which is a spot where recent deaths go, the rule is that they assign their own photographer to make sure that instances like what happened with Trump don't happen, where someone's headstone who didn't ask.
Rob is winning because he's sticking to the hypocrisy and double standard of Hutch's position. He hasn't established any kind of double standard. He has not established any hypocrisy. You would have to accept this premise that I can't possibly care about something if I haven't tweeted about it, which is stupid.
To be involved in any kind of like political ad or photo or whatever, to make sure that those fallen soldiers are not against their will used in that kind of way. Do you understand like why that rule exists? Would you agree that that's a good rule?
I would say that it's a rule that's equally as important as, aren't there rules that also say that you can't give political speeches in front of uniformed members? Isn't that true? There's a rule.
The deflection. This is the constant deflection, bro.
I believe that says that.
I don't know the particulars of that rule. Can we focus on
this
rule?
What I'm saying is that you can say, right, what I'm telling you is, I'm telling you in the past, it seems that things similar to that rule have been violated, and with campaign ads, which I didn't say a peep about, which shows that you're...
This is like literal textbook whataboutism.
Hypothetical, if this happened, you would freak out, is untrue, because I didn't in 2020. Whether or not...
You deflect to something else without engaging in the substance of what was discussed or whatever.
This rule, let me finish. I'm answering. Whether or not this particular rule is something that would be necessary, I don't know. I'd have to think. There could be particulars where I would think that maybe it wouldn't apply, maybe it should apply, whatever. I don't think necessarily it's a very important thing. I think the fact that we see...
It's not an important thing, really? It's not an important thing to make sure, like, really, these rules are not there for a good reason?
That these families are talking about far more grievous specific things.
Of course, he has to take this position that the rules really kind of don't matter, because if he acknowledged that the rules are there for a good reason, then he would have to, he would tacitly be acknowledging that Trump violating that rule is disrespectful to fallen soldiers.
that have been done by the opponents that are being ignored by not just the Kamala Harris campaign, but
he is like, again, it's just massive projection because he's accusing me of not giving a about fallen soldiers, and then he turns around and says, well, these rules that are there to protect fallen soldiers don't really matter. So he is doing the exact same thing that he's accusing me of doing.
Media and you shows that you don't actually give a shit about any of this.
I'm asking you without pivoting. Can you?
I'm not
please
pivoting.
pivot?
I just
Can you-
did I include in there?
No, let me ask the question. Do you not agree that it would be a good rule, generally speaking, to make sure that you don't feature the headstone of some soldier who didn't ask to be a part of anything campaign related? Do you not agree that this would be a generally good rule to make sure that the grave sites of fallen soldiers are not disrespected?
Okay, I'll repeat the answer. You're incapable of hearing, so I'll repeat the answer. In general,
Can
I
you
can
do
see
it
like
without pivoting?
I could do it in the way that I feel like doing. In general, I would say I'm not going to listen to your demands as someone who transparently has already conceded that you don't give a shit about the fallen soldiers or about these particular families. You conceded, as you admitted.
Hutch conceded.
Hutch
That's a pretty
conceded.
foul thing to suggest.
Right, and you conceded it. You conceded it. That's what
I
you
conceded it sarcastically. I was like, yeah, fine, I'll accept your premise, blah, blah, blah. And now he's trying to pin me down on obvious sarcasm.
I did it for the purpose of
Oh,
addressing the
you conceded.
conversation.
Fine, you conceded. Fine, so you
tell me,
conceded.
to
So
tell me,
Hutch
listen,
has
listen,
conceded.
to tell
Yeah, a
me.
simple yes or no. I'll
Listen,
answer your
listen,
question.
Rob,
I'll answer
Rob.
your question with a simple yes or no. If you answer mine with a simple yes or no.
It's a foul
Fair
thing
enough.
to
Fair
suggest.
enough.
Don't accuse me of that. That's so
You
foul.
conceded.
Know me.
You conceded it, Hutch. You conceded it. Yes or no?
You're
Did you
playing-
concede
you're
that?
playing games right now.
Yes or no?
Rob,
Did you
listen to me.
concede that?
I have lost a best friend. He was one of my best friends.
That's not the question. A simple
it was
yes or
one
no.
of
Don't
those-
pivot.
Listen to
Don't
me.
pivot.
Listen.
Don't
I
pivot.
know what
A
it's
simple
like.
yes or no. Why are you
I
pivoting?
know
You're
what-
pivoting.
I
Why are you
know what it's
pivoting?
like.
A simple yes or no.
It's not pivoting. This is me demonstrating like I know what it's like to lose somebody in a war. That's what I was trying to say. And for him to just accuse me of not caring about that when I've lost someone who was 22 years old, like it's just foul. It's such a foul thing to suggest.
Did you concede that you don't give a shit about these particular families?
let me say it plainly.
Did you
Let me-
concede yes or no? Did you concede yes or no? Did you
Let me
concede yes
say-
or no?
let
I
me
would
say
like
this-
you to
Bro, dude, Jesus Christ. Is there like a pathology here? Is this like an emotional disorder? What is this?
answer yes or no, and then you can expound. Did you concede? Hutch, did you concede? Why are you pivoting?
Rehabilitate your image.
Why are you pivoting?
Humiliating yourself. After humiliating yourself with the AI debacle.
More pivoting. More pivoting. A simple yes or no.
You accused me.
A simple yes or no. Did you concede?
That is
Did you concede?
Thing to suggest.
A simple yes or no. Did you concede that you didn't give a shit about these particular families of these fallen soldiers? Did you concede yes or no? Did you concede yes or no?
Do you think
Rob won the debate? It's true. It's true.
it was fairly obvious that I was doing so in a sarcastic way to advance the conversation?
So wait a minute. That's right. That's right. Now.
And so at this point, I'm like, fine, if you don't want me to be sarcastic, let me clarify. And he just goes,
does the audience see? Do you see? Do you see what
happens?
happens? Do you see? Exactly as I said. So this is what.
do you see what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass? He's straight up John Goodman. He's like a belligerent version of John Goodman in The Big Lebowski here.
Hutch did. So the entire point of me doing this topic tonight was that people like Hutch don't give a shit about these soldiers, these families. Kamala Harris doesn't give a shit. The media doesn't give a shit. And instead, they just want to pivot to talk about the rules of Arlington. So he comes on and says, sure, I'll concede. Let me finish. He comes on and says, sure, I'll concede so we can talk about what I want to talk about, which is what they always do. They have to control the narrative. They can't talk about things unless they're controlling what's stuff. So I'm like, no, we can't just move on because you're being sarcastic. You're not really conceding. You're like, yeah, I'll concede. Then when pressed on the...
Well, he's trying to set up like he thinks he's clever too. It's like he wants to set up this sort of like trap, right? And if I fall into this trap, you can just ignore everything I have to say about the particulars of the rules. Maybe it's a good thing that those rules exist to protect against these kinds of things happening in the future. Instead of having that conversation, he wants to do this thing where he like proves that I don't care about dead soldiers. And then once he proves that, it's like, okay, I can just dismiss the rest of what you have to say. It's so juvenile. It's so silly.
The fact that you concede, you literally do exactly what what I said you would do is say, it's clear that I was being sarcastic and I'm not spurting out. I know when to breathe. I'm doing just fine. Go ahead. So you conceded that you didn't give a shit about these families facetiously because you didn't want to talk about the families. You didn't want to talk about. So think about this. When you had, as soon as I finish with this point, when you had a chance to finally to address what these family members are saying, instead you said, I'll just joke and say, sure, I concede, so I don't have to talk about what they said. Further proving your callousness and not giving a shit about the families of fallen soldiers. Because you still, even here, when you had a chance to address.
It's still such a foul thing to say to somebody who lost a friend. Like, has he lost a friend in war? What a weird thing to say about a total stranger. Like, when we talk about partisan brain rot, this is what we mean.
I would like to clarify my position when it comes to the families of fallen soldiers. I think that those people who lost loved ones in Afghanistan during that pullout were obviously devastated. And those are American citizens. They have every right to have political preferences. They had every right to invite Donald Trump to come and visit those gravestones. There's nothing wrong with that. I have no judgment of those families whatsoever. And if they want to denounce Kamala, if they want to blame Biden, if they want to prop up Trump, that's their right to do that. And I have no ill will towards those people. Do you accept that clarification?
No, I don't accept that clarification because you haven't directly responded. Are you voting for Kamala Harris?
Of course.
Okay, you haven't directly responded what they're saying about the disparagement that they received and the ill treatment that they've received specifically from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and this administration. Of course, you're right.
I don't have to agree with their particular interpretation of these events to sympathize, or rather empathize with the pain that they feel. Rob doesn't get this. He doesn't understand.
We're talking about not only are they blaming, which could be right or wrong, which is obviously right in this case because of the buffoonish way that the pullout occurred, but we're talking about the fact that they've since been treated like in their own words, by both Biden and Harris. And
Biden and Harris didn't say a word about the families, as far as I understand. The only person they criticized was Trump.
This particular event where where Trump showed up, that's being used by you, by the mainstream media, and by Kamala Harris's team to say, this incident itself proves that Trump doesn't give a shit about the families of fallen soldiers.
This part of the conversation, it should have taken us 5 minutes to get here, and it's taken us 15 because he's so belligerent.
Completely ignoring what the people that invited him there said about his opponents shows that you really don't give a shit about fallen soldiers. You only care about it insofar.
It's just so foul to say that.
As it helps advance
What a disgusting creature this man is.
You don't give a shit about what they said about Kamala Harris or addressing it. You're talking superficially. Of course, any family can say what they want about any candidate, but you haven't addressed the fact that they're saying Kamala Harris is using this as a campaign issue, saying that she cares about fallen soldiers.
Kamala is using this as a campaign issue. Why did Donald Trump film a campaign ad in a cemetery, Rob?
I understand that kind of grief. So when I'm telling you this, it's not superficial. I'm not lying to you. I'm not bullshitting. The pain that they must have experienced, I'm sure, was terrible.
That's a pivot to what I just said.
I'm not pivoting. I'm not pivoting away from anything. I'm fully addressing the accusation that he's levying at me. Maybe I'm like Lex Friedman, and maybe I'm too optimistic about people that like, maybe if I can just deliver it in a way, like maybe he can understand like what I'm trying to say. And it's just not possible because he's just like,
you accuse me of not caring about these people's
That
pain,
is not,
and
that
you're
is
wrong.
not, I just explained to you. I just said, of course, when we're talking superficially about people's heartbreak of their sons dying or their daughters.
We superficially, maybe you're talking about it superficially.
Are you telling me right now that if this would have been the opposite way, that had this been Kamala Harris showing up here and Trump, these people had died, the 7th year anniversary of people that died under Trump's watch, and they invite Kamala, she shows up and they're very happy that she's there, and Trump's team makes a big story out of, but she took pictures at Arlington. One, you're telling me you would have said,
you're deflecting to a hypothetical that, I mean, it just didn't happen, and this hasn't happened. If Kamala took a selfie and filmed a campaign ad in front of a headstone of soldiers that didn't consent to it, I would criticize her for it.
Absolutely, that's terrible, Kamala. And second, you would have said, I don't give a shit what the people say. I don't give a shit that the people are saying that Trump's garbage, blah, blah, blah. They have the right to say what they want. Of course not. You would be making it a huge issue and saying, how dare Trump try to stand on the graves of these fallen soldiers whose families he was refusing to even contact? How dare he?
It's not about It's not about the simple fact that they took a photograph. Arlington insists on them using their own like Department of Defense approved photographers to make sure that the shots are framed in a way that doesn't involve some other dead soldier. So for example, I told you, my friend that got killed, he was a die-hard Democrat. He came up with this fake group called the Democratic Bruise Crew. Like it was this whole thing. And he went off to fight in Iraq and he got killed in a roadside bomb. I can tell you with 100% certainty, if his headstone was ever featured in a Trump TikTok, he would have been pissed. That is why these rules exist.
That's fine. Notice how that is a complete...
Listen. You presented the hypothetical if Kamala came and took photos and that sort of thing. If this hypothetical happened, right? If Kamala took photos and she featured the headstone of a diehard MAGA soldier that died, and then that person's family said how like this is wrong.
But that's not that's not an analogous situation. That's not happening right now. You're pivoting off the analogy. You're pivoting off the analogy to make another analogy.
I'm laying out the exact same situation.
No, you're not. I asked you a hypothetical instead of answering. You're like, well, what?
So this gets interesting in a second. 1 second.
About this hypothetical.
Wait. Let's just make it exactly 1-to-1. If the families of multiple service members invited Kamala to come to Arlington and do a ceremony of remembrance, and she showed up, she insisted on her own staff taking these photos. In one of those photos, there was a headstone of like a MAGA person, and that person's family got upset. You're telling me right now you wouldn't empathize with that?
No, I'd empathize with them. Can you show me the anti-MAGA person whose headstone was featured?
What?
You're saying in your direct hypothetical that if there was a headstone featured of a Kamala that was of Kamala's photo op that was a MAGA person, could I sympathize with that MAGA person's family? So that would imply, if this is a direct analogy, that right now you're saying there was an anti-MAGA person whose headstone...
Wait for it. It gets interesting.
...was featured in the pictures that Trump used.
Oh, I understand the confusion. So I'm 100% sure that this person is MAGA, but there was the family. Are you just unaware? There was a family member of someone whose headstone was featured in a Trump TikTok, and that family member has made a public statement saying that they're disappointed that their loved one was included in a Trump ad. Now, I don't know if they're anti-MAGA. They could be apolitical. They could be a Republican.
But there is, I'm unaware. You are saying there is a person that's came out and said that headstone right there was my son's, my daughter's. I don't want it used in a political ad. That's what you're saying.
And now we find out that Rob had no idea that there was a family that came out and said, we don't appreciate that you used our headstone. So at this point, it is now revealed Rob has no idea why people are upset. He was so uninformed. I don't know how he could not have known that. How did you not know this story? He's been streaming at this point for an hour and 45 minutes, ranting about this topic. And he had no idea why people were upset. That blew my mind. At this moment, I'm like, really? You like, what?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. Yeah, I sympathize with that person. Absolutely. Do I think that it's a huge deal? No, I don't.
First of all, he says he does sympathize with them. That is a tacit admission that he understands why those rules are in place, which is a tacit admission that what Trump did was wrong. But then he immediately follows it up with, I don't think it's a big deal, completely ignoring the feelings of the family that complained about it. After he's been accusing me of not caring about the feelings of Gold Star families, he just turns around and says, I don't think it's a big deal. You know, yeah, I understand why the rule's there, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I would sympathize with that family, absolutely. I think that that's a far less grievous deal, and things like that occur many times anyways. For example, that could occur in...
Really? When has this happened before? When has a politician shoved Army staff out of the way so that they could take a photo op in front of a gravestone? I'm sorry, you said this happens all the time. When?
In a cemetery. It could have occurred in the Biden thing, right? It could be the fact that...
It didn't. It didn't occur in the Biden thing. It's not analogous.
You're making it sound like, well, when Biden did these campaign ads, we don't know if it was directly in the section.
They weren't campaign ads. Rob, in order to deflect away from, like, he didn't know that a family was upset and they did complain. And so now he's saying, like, well, yeah, you know, I understand the rule, but what if Biden did the same thing? Well, he didn't. So we're not having that conversation, Rob. How do you feel about the rule?
You have over and over and over pivoted. You have just said, of course, their family members died. I sympathize with that. Maybe they blame Biden. But what you haven't talked about is them saying the treatment they're receiving from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden is abysmal. And the fact that Kamala Harris
and Joe Biden did not make any kind of a statement about the families. They just went after Trump because what Trump did was wrong.
This is out there saying, I respect the families of fallen soldiers is a lie because she has treated them like and has ignored them. And you ignored it not only in the fact that you haven't talked about it yet, even though you're hyper focused on this specific situation and doing videos and tweeting about it, but because you came in here and callously came in here and deflected by saying, sure, I'll concede I don't give a shit about them, to avoid everything you could of talking about what these, let me finish, I'll give you the last word, to avoid everything you could of talking about these people said. You don't give a shit. You continue again to deflect. You haven't even once remotely tried to respond to the fact that we're not just talking about, yes, you're sympathetic that their sons died and maybe they blame Harris and Biden. You haven't responded to the fact that if we're going to talk about who's disparaging fallen soldiers, that these particular families say the treatment they've received is shit. And you callously tried to lie and say, sure, I concede, to avoid talking about it because you don't give a you only
I think it's callous to casually accuse someone of not caring about like soldier deaths, especially when that person lost someone they loved in war. That's callous.
Care about fallen soldiers insofar as it could benefit you going after political opposition that you don't care about. I'll give you the final word and then I have to leave. It has to be like 2 minutes though, because I got an engagement at the end.
Rob, I think it's rich that you're accusing me of not caring about the wishes and feelings of fallen soldiers when you just told me a moment ago that the family who spoke up and said that they didn't appreciate their son's headstone being featured in a Trump ad. You said, it's not that big of a deal. That is you literally saying, I don't give a about the feeling of that person who spoke up. You are massively projecting right now.
It's not. How is that? How is me saying I absolutely
projecting?
How is that me saying I absolutely sympathize with that family member that's upset about that, which I honestly do? How is that me disparaging that family when I'm admitting absolutely?
You don't think it's a big deal.
I said I don't think it's as big of a. Well, one, it's not that big of a deal, and second, it's nowhere near as big of a deal as specifically it's having these. It's not.
Right. That is you saying that you don't care about their feelings, or that their feelings don't.
That is not me saying that I don't care about their feelings. Me saying that.
That's you saying that the family is getting upset for kind of silly reasons because it's not a big deal. That's what he's saying.
But understand it
on this particular thing.
That's bull. That's bull.
They don't appreciate their dead son.
I sympathize. Absolutely. I think that absolutely. I think that that's terrible. I do. I don't think it's near as big of a deal as.
That's terrible. Okay, so all right. He's saying now I got him to concede that. Okay, so I feel like this is kind of like a gotcha. Because he's saying that it's terrible that the family felt that way. So he must necessarily believe that Trump did a bad thing. There's no way that you can say that it's terrible that the family went through that pain of having their son's headstone featured in a political ad. You just said that's terrible, right? So that means that you acknowledge that what Trump did was really bad. How do you escape that conclusion?
So someone agree?
No, so I'll tell you. Agree. No, I'll tell you what I agree. I'll tell you what I agree. Go ahead.
Rob, so if you agree that that family had a right to be upset, then you agree that those rules are in place for a good reason.
I agree
to avoid this thing happening.
I'll go back to what I said which you refused to listen to, that yes, I absolutely think I could see a reason for those rules. I could see times that they wouldn't really apply. I don't think it's as near a big of deal as having a photo that could have something.
Who does he think he is?
True.
That you as a family member would say, hey, I don't really like that photo. That is on a completely different level than having a disastrous policy. Let me finish. Then having a disastrous policy that leads to the death of soldiers, then refusing to show up to events about those soldiers, refusing to say their names, refusing to ever call them, and then putting campaign ads talking about this specific event with these families of these fallen soldiers, saying that you care about the families of fallen soldiers and your opponent don't. I think that is easily exponentially 10 times worse than what Donald Trump's accused of doing. And the fact that you and Kamala Harris refuse to talk about it.
Like, we can quibble about that, but I just want to focus, Rob, on the fact that you said you understand why those rules are in place. And it's a terrible thing that the family felt that way.
in fact, want to come on and make jokes and be sarcastic. Yeah, I'll concede that I feel their pain, whatever.
Because you're accusing me of
further shows exactly what my criticism.
Really
you have proven exactly what my criticism of you is, that you don't give a shit what these people said, that you just want to control the narrative to use this as a political point. That's it. That's what you exhibited in this.
He's accusing me of not caring about what this Gold Star family had to say. And at the same time, he's saying like, well, you know, the other family, it's not really a big deal.
You acknowledge that those rules being in place make sense to make sure that families like the one who are upset about what happened don't experience that kind of pain. So you are tacitly acknowledging that Trump should not have violated those rules.
Do you think those rules should exist for all of Arlington or just this particular section?
Yeah, they do exist for all of Arlington. Yes, they do. The whole cemetery. It's the same rules.
I don't give a shit what the rules are.
I'm saying know what the rules are?
No, I don't give a shit right now. What I give a shit right now is, do you think? Because listen to me.
Why would you not give a shit about what the rules are? Who's the one in this conversation that doesn't give a f about the families of fallen soldiers? If you don't care about what the rules are, really?
The Arlington staff, they have their own photographers, and those photographers took that video of Biden on that day in Arlington. They assigned their own photographers to make sure that anybody who comes in there is in compliance with these rules to avoid situations like the one that happened with Trump.
Wait a minute. So if an Arlington photograph would have occurred there with Trump, and it would have included same picture, same gravestones included, but it was in the...
They wouldn't have taken the same picture. That's the point. They wouldn't have taken the same picture. They would not have framed the other headstone in the picture. That's why they're there. Rob, why? Why are you like this, Rob?
Official Arlington person.
Knows no bounds.
Would you not have empathized with that family member that said, I'm pissed?
The Arlington staff would have framed the photo to make sure that the other headstone wasn't in the video, Rob.
Bullshit.
That's the point you're missing.
Bullshit. I can prove it.
Look it up.
Bullshit. You can prove it.
Okay, well then I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear. Your argument then is in the 2020 campaign ad of Joe Biden, where we see a bunch of gravestones, that the Arlington staff.
DOD staff.
Okay, that DOD staff.
And it was, again, the video was taken when Biden was vice president. It wasn't, the video at the time was not shot for campaign purposes. Now, I guess you can use it in a campaign later on, as long as you add a disclaimer at the bottom. This is not an endorsement, blah, blah, blah.
Contacted the family of every single person that's gravestone was shown to make sure they were okay with it. That's your argument?
You're asking me to comment about something. I'm not familiar with that section of the cemetery.
But why does it matter? Why does it matter?
Somebody comes in to take a photo or video, it's DOD staff that does.
Why does it? Your argument is horseshit. Because it doesn't matter if you know what that particular... It doesn't matter. And you already agreed, if that rule was there for good reason, that just because it's a DOD staff that's taking the picture, the good reason would be you don't want someone's gravestone in there that doesn't agree with the political message. It doesn't matter if it's a Trump staffer or a DOD staffer taking it.
That would be one of the reasons, but it's just generally there to make sure that people don't politicize dead soldiers. That's the point of these rules.
The idea you're saying, if it was a DOD staff, they would make sure that there's no gravestones of anyone that might not be down with that political message is horseshit.
Yeah.
That's bullshit.
It's not.
Okay, so I just want...
But he already admitted, like earlier in the conversation, that he understands why the rule's in place. He already admitted that. And now he's like blatantly contradicting himself. And he's like, well, no, it's bullshit.
We'll leave you going this. So if there is a video, you don't have to agree, but if there is a video that was used in a campaign ad of Joe Biden around headstones in Arlington, your argument is, what you're telling me right now is that you know that the Arlington staff specifically contacted each family member of everyone whose gravestone was seen to make sure that they agreed with the political message of Joe Biden.
He thinks this is some big gotcha, but if the DOD staff was there that day taking those pictures, their job is to make sure that everything is in compliance with their policy. That's their job. That was the job of the person who tried to stop Trump from going into Section 60 to take those selfies with his own photographers and videographers. There was a staff who physically tried to block Trump, saying, no, you need to take our photographers. And his campaign staff pushed that person out of the way and just muscled their way into that section. And then what happened? They included the headstone of somebody who didn't want to be involved in this.
If I were to find this ad, I'll bet you anything. None of the headstones have visible names.
So what's it matter? You could know that that's your family's headstone.
Because, what do you mean that doesn't matter? What do you mean that doesn't matter?
If you can't see the name
There's a difference between seeing a headstone like in the background and a headstone with like a prominent name and you can just easily read the name. Obviously, there's a big difference there.
the headstone, but based on the headstone location, everything, that's your family member, you don't have the right to be upset?
It's not the same thing.
So you don't give a does that family have the right to be upset, yes or no?
Find me a family who got upset about that ad.
No, Rob, I'm the one that actually.
That's what I thought. You can't answer. You don't give a shit about the rules. You're only using this for political expediency, and you came in here proving that by.
So number one, he didn't even know that a family complained in the first place. Number two, he has no idea what these rules are. Why are you commenting on this situation, Rob? Why are you talking about this news story? If you're not going to do the bare minimum to find out like what's going on, like after this conversation I had with Rob, I looked up the rules, blah, blah, blah. And like, I was familiar with the person, but why are you you're doing an hour, 2-hour stream talking about this situation. And you didn't do like the bare minimum to like understand what was even being discussed and why people were upset. How lazy are you?
By playing a game and saying
you
actually
that the rules there for a good
conceded
reason.
you conceded that you didn't give a shit about these Gold Star families, and then you admitted that you did it as a game just because you didn't want to talk about what they had to say. Take it easy, Hutch. We'll see you. We'll see you, sir. There you have it. Now let's get to my prior engagement.
Bro, I cannot believe that Rob had a reputation for some reason of being like somewhat reasonable. Where did that come from?